Hi guys, hello everyone. I'm Sumit. I am the founder for Heads Up Corporation. What we are primarily an HR advisory firm where we help various startups and SMEs across India in scaling their entire HR team. That is what our primary bread and butter is, and we have been working with multiple funded startups, established medium enterprises, and uh, there are a lot of things about HR which we have kind of understood because it's not about a settled organization or an organization which is already a unicorn, but it's more about who are going to become a unicorn tomorrow. So it's an interesting journey which we are at today. The entire objective of this webinar is to really educate everyone on the evolving role of HRBPs in various product and technology companies or uh, product and technology teams per se. Uh, I'm excited to host three of very close people. Abhishek, Abhishek, Ram, Kushal, and I. We are all alumni of Tata Institute of Social Sciences, Mumbai. Abhishek is a 2012 alum. He brings in multiple experiences from the world of startup, like almost like no one else. He has worked in LinkedIn, he has worked in Uber, and currently he is working in one of our latest unicorns in Browser Stack. Uh, Welcome, Abhishek. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Sumit. Thank you for having me.
Then we have Kushal. Kushal brings in a lot of experience. Even before MBA, he had a lot of experience. So the amount of richness of content which you are going to expect from Kushal is going to be tremendous. So do shoot questions to him, is what I'll suggest. And Kushal has worked in Snapdeal, Bayer, Mintra, and he's currently working in Mintra. And I might have missed a couple of organizations as after starting.
You're missing echo there.
Echo, you have worked for us 18 months in Echo. That's what I'm missing. Sorry that. So a lot of diverse startup experience again. Kushal is bringing from being an HRBP of sales, he has shifted to more of an HRBP director role of technology and engineering team. That is what Kushal's journey has been. Uh,
Thank
then
you so much.
and obviously welcome to the webinar. Thank you for your time, Kushal. Uh, Finally, we have Ram. Ram Ram is my senior, just like Kushal, 2015 batch, TISS alumni. Big time mentor for me. And uh, Ram started his journey at Flipkart, and soon after that, in a couple of years' time, he went to Swiggy, and he's been doing a lot of digital transformation work, trying to bring processes, people, technology together. And currently, he is managing multiple HRBPs for the technology and the engineering teams. So, thank you, Ram, for your time. Great to have all of you on the
Thank you
call.
so much.
It's really
Thank
very
you. Delighted.
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, before any other thing, do you want to add anything to this, or I start shooting the discussion pointers which I we have already created? I should start.
No, absolutely. Let's
Yeah,
let's start.
Go
Looking
ahead.
forward to
Yeah.
learning from everyone here.
yeah. Let's dive in.
Just for the audience, guys, it's going to be a discussion between four of us for the next 20 odd minutes. Then the podium would be open. If you have got any questions which are there, just raise your hand. I will bring you to the podium. No chatting, etc. We'll so that the questions are right there, and the people who are more relevant are going to answer that. Hope that makes sense to everyone. So on that particular note, we're going to start with this entire session. Kushal, the first question really goes to you. Because of the multiple experiences which you have, this question is really framed in that way. That while you started your journey as an HRBP sales, right, and now you are completely focusing on HRBP as a technology and engineering team, really want to understand that what has changed in the last 5 or 6 years, because the rapid change which has happened, nothing has it's tremendous the amount of changes which have happened in the last 5 years compared to last 15 or 20 years. So really want you to add some insights on this thing.
Sure. I started as an engineer and then moved to HR. And I remember this date very precisely. This was, I think, 10th of June 2013. And Ram would also remember this. Ravinder San walked into the class and he wrote on the blackboard, HR is a glorified clerical job. And I was like, oh my God, what did I do to my career? Like, what is he talking about? And then when I started my journey in 2015 and started as an HR business partner, I found a little truth to the statement that he wrote on the blackboard. And it sometimes haunts me also, to be honest. When I started 6 years back, HRBP was expected to be a jack of all trades, and at that time we had like major three e-commerce poster boys there, right? Snapdeal, Flipkart, and Amazon.
Yeah.
And when I started, we were expected to be as jack of all trades. Business will not run to every COE; they will come to you. You figure it out, right? And then you have to figure out what will be the right thing to do. You need to know talent acquisition, you need to know talent management, performance management, compensation, everything. So you literally had to be the jack of all trades and master of none. In the last 6 years, what I have seen is now. HRBPs, especially in engineering, they can't just rely on COEs. You can't just tell your business as a CEO is expected to deliver on this. Sorry, it's a company-wide process. We are trying to standardize the entire experience for everyone. That won't fly. You need to cater to your audience, is what I've realized as an HR business partner in the last 6 years. And now I see the HR business partnering role evolving more on the lines of being a true partner than what we used to earlier call as an enabler. You can't, as an HR business partner, you can't just say that I don't understand my business. You can't just say I don't understand how Slack, Confluence, all these documents work. You need to know your business. You need to understand the entire software development lifecycle. You need to understand what is a Jira dashboard, what is a sprint planning, what is agile methodology for you to really contribute to your business. So if you are someone who's trying to make a career in HR business partnering, that too in technology, you can't be a jack of all trades. You have to customize solutions for your team members, and you also have to work with COEs and give them insights, because they will come and tell you that performance management is happening standardized for the entire organization this way, and we want to replicate that in engineering. But that may not be the right way of doing it for your business. So you also have to be like that bridge. A lot of us know about product management, right? Product managers have this PRDs that they write. I believe it's high time that HR business partners also start writing people-related documents, right? And start giving it to COEs saying that this is what we expect you to deliver on. Because you understand the business, you understand what engineering wants, and that's the level of impact that you will have to create as an HR business partner. So I think in the last 6 years, it has become more now a customized solution for the business that you're supporting, rather than just ensuring that you are an executionist in terms of implementing a performance management policy or an employer branding or a DNI. Just to give an example, when I started my career, I was given this mandate of improving our diversity numbers. Now, when I started that, the simple solution was to move from an A to a B percentage. That was a simple thing to do, right? that was all I knew about execution. Just hire more people from a particular gender, and the problem is solved. Now, when I go back and look at the same problem 6 years back, what I'm asking is, great, diversity might be great. What about the inclusion part of it? What am I doing when it comes to pay parity? How am I ensuring the promotion within both genders is something that I'm looking at? The promotion velocity is common. How am I ensuring that both these genders are, or in fact, not both genders, all three genders now? And if I'm an LGBTIQ friendly organization, how am I ensuring that people who come from that community are also treated in the same way as others? So the dynamics have changed. It's no longer about just execution and making sure that a mandate is achieved, a metric is achieved. That's no longer the approach for an HRBP now.
Great. So, Kushal, if we say that the role, which was more of a generalist as an HRBP 5 years back, has now really segmented into various specialized roles, is what you really need to do in order to reach to a particular level where you can actually manage the engineering force. We can safely say that, right?
Yes, we'll have to, as HR business partners, I think as an HR business partner, you need a lot of breadth. You can't just assume that you will pass on the problem to the COE and that will be all that is required from you. You need to have a lot of breadth, and honestly, you have to be a jack of all trades still. But how do you customize solutions, and how do you help your COEs in arriving at a proper solution for the business that you're supporting is the most critical thing. Because the engineering dynamics is very different. The engineering as an industry, like every day we have new startups that are mushrooming, right? Attrition is at an all-time high. Offer rejections are at an all-time high. People call in Monday morning saying that I'm not joining at 10:30. And now we are living in that era, that at 9 o'clock you get to know there's an offer rejection for a 10:30 onboarding meeting. So you have to figure out solutions accordingly, right? How do you solve for this? Because this is unheard of, right? We are living in an era where offer rejections at certain levels. I was speaking to Abhishek last year, and you were doing a benchmarking around it. Offer rejections are close to 40-45% at junior levels in engineering. Now, how do you solve for that? And this is unheard of, right? So that's where it's important that HRBP role evolves. You can't just rest on your past laurels of only being an HR business partner and saying that this is TA's job, this is comms job, this is their job, and that's all. So I think you have to evolve as an HR business partner, and to be a good HR business partner, you have to become a jack of all trades, where you need to know the entire breadth of the function.
This takes me to Ram. Ram, so Kushal obviously mentioned he's questioning a lot of things which is there as for the role of the entire HRBP, which is there. But when we talk about really managing the product teams, and you have been working into fairly settled startups compared to the new ones which are really mushrooming right now. How has been your experience, and what are the critical challenges which you are facing right now, apart from offer rejection? Because that is something which has kind of become an industry trend. Offer shopping is something which is happening, that people would be having 5 offers on a single day, and even they don't know where they're going to join. So it's absolutely impossible for us as an HR professional or recruiters that will he join or will she will join us or not. So if you can also elaborate on the critical challenges, Ram.
Okay, sure, man. Cool. See, I'll think I'll actually answer this as 2 questions, right? So one is, let's actually look at what's your playbook for scanning the challenges in the first place, and the way I would actually pick this is, first, when you have a product and engineering team, there is actually a business to be done, and you're actually in the business of generating revenue. That's what you're actually doing. And what that means is, how do you actually understand the entire life cycle of a business? How do you actually connect your business strategy towards product strategy towards tech strategy, and then how do you see hey, how the value generation actually happens? That's where actually the fundamental thing is. And once you have a strong understanding of that, and once you know that hey, here is how the flywheel is actually going to churn, and here is what are the levers that you actually have a control over, then what happens is going back and actually understanding what are the potential factors that is going to actually affect the levers. Some are internal, some are external. And today, probably there are more external factors which are affecting the levers. That's what we're speaking about, offer, reject, etc. At the same time, there are also internal levers that are actually at play, right? So the fundamental part of it is, the challenge in general I see for any HR business partner, especially when you actually become a tech HR business partner, actually starts with our own self, which is, are we able to connect the dots between all 3 levers, and are we able to see how value generation happens to the business? Once you actually get that lay of the land, the next question is, again, I've seen this, and I'm starting with a little bit of a basic, part in here, which is the empathy towards your personas, like the engineers and the product managers. A lot many times, when we start off with it, there is, of course, you actually look at employees as employees. At the same time, there are their own specific needs. When I speak about empathy, it fundamentally starts with, are you able to listen to your employees, be it engineers, product managers? Are you able to understand the language? Are you able to understand they're actually speaking about certain things? Are you able to bring in that particular empathy that actually requires, right? So that's number one. Second one is, while actually solving for, when we are actually scanning your internal ecosystem, there is an external ecosystem which is slightly shifting. There's almost like a scarcity of talent, which is real. There's a lot of money coming in, which means that there's naturally going to be like a what you would call as the talent density scarcity, which is real. And a lot of companies are actually trying to solve for it in their own real ways. Now, between these two, while there is actually an external factor and there is an internal factor, the fundamental thing is, hey, can you actually treat your employees as adults? Can you actually forge really, really strong partnerships? And ensure that the value creation process is actually really held tight. At the end of the day, while of course there is technology, there is product, etc., just ensuring that you actually stay intact towards the core vision of the organization. That's number one. And when you actually have that core vision actually intact, when you know that everyone is actually firing towards the same goal, the next element is actually towards coming back and actually saying that hey, what, do I understand these people enough to actually go back and solve their problems? So like for example, the most famous probably the most prevalent language in which coders are actually working on is probably like 6 years old right now, right? And React is just pretty recent. Now at the end of the day, unless and until we are able to really see how their world is changing, really see what their life is actually about, we're not going to be able to really add value. So for me, again, that's where it actually starts. The next one is, from a fundamental lens, I generally see this, a lot of narrative around either sometimes, of course, tech is special, tech is important, that narrative actually comes through in every single organization. But at the end of the day, everyone is actually an adult. And as long as we're able to ensure that, hey, we stick to this fundamentals of, adult relationships, and you actually go back and say, hey, here's what adults do need. And you're able to decipher the fundamentals of like what Daniel Pink says, right? The autonomy, mastery, purpose, everybody has their own, motivators. Go back and actually figure out and solve for it. And at the same time, when you actually try to solve for it in a slightly more personalized zone. Don't take a very one paintbrush for all approach. Rather, go back and actually approach it to their own customized ones. The basic challenge where I see is that, many a times I've seen us as professionals approach this as a solution first, thing than a problem first thing. Sometimes, we tend to take a, hey, here is a standard solution. Here is, what is actually available now. Actually go back and fix this. So I think, sometimes, there is this tendency for us to actually not soak ourselves enough in the problem space a lot more. So again, when you actually soak a lot more time staying in the problem space, trying to understand what the real problem is, and trying to understand the stated and the unstated needs, you'll actually get the solution. I'm not going to speak a little bit about I'm not going to spend a lot of time in the challenges of the tech ecosystem. I think there's Kushal spoke about it enough. There is scarcity, etc., etc. For me, the biggest challenge that I see is our ability to actually really stay in the problem space, our ability to actually really empathize with our end consumers. And once you're able to do this part, the next one is, try to actually solve the problem than actually bringing in your own playbooks and actually saying that now I actually just stick this playbook on any particular problem statement, right? Try to figure out the actual one. This happens, also sometimes because, many times we're not able to force the right partnerships with business. I think gone are the days when we actually designed everything. Nowadays, everything is actually designed in partnership with the business. So you really actually bring in, business folks into your own designs, and actually like co-creating most of these elements together. And are you able to really forge these partnerships? Are you able to really see how these levers move, and how are these, individual contributors, these product managers or engineers contributing to these levers? We're able to see this picture largely solved. The fundamental thing is, today there is a disconnect in us being able to connect these, levers, and at the same time, empathize with our, end consumers, in this case, the engineers and the product managers. And finally, not approaching it with a problem first mindset. Sometimes, we tend to approach it from a solution first mindset. That's largely the three challenges that I see.
Absolutely. Great. A lot of insights in that. Now, with these challenges, there's another set of challenges, and which will take me to Abhishek. So Abhishek, someone approached me and said that I've got 3 offers, which was pretty much for similar roles from Myntra, Swiggy, and one more organization. And he said that which one should I take? Right? Fairly similar compensation, and we really cannot differentiate when it comes to the offer in terms of what is being there. And all the organizations are doing fairly great. But now it really all boils down to what is your EVP, and how is the talent really perceiving your organization in terms of whether to join or whether not to join. So really want to understand from you, because you have been into the entire recruitment part, you've been a talent leader, and the cliched line which we have heard while we are studying the war for talent, this is beyond war for talent, right? This is not war for talent. This is I really don't have a terminology right now to say this thing, but it's not war of talent. This is absolute madness which is going outside in the market. So really want to understand from you as to what should the organizations do to attract that talent who can really join. And obviously the offer acceptance ratio, we know how good that is. So just if you can share some insights on that.
Sure. Yeah, so I think organizations need to pause, take a deep breath, step back, really, rather than getting into that entire bandwagon of trying to just attract and win at the talent marketplace, right? Because, and this I've figured the hard way, that an EVP is not necessarily what you project to the talent market outside. It's also how your processes, policies, everything comes together internally to serve your employees, right? Unless that matches the entire messaging that you're going outside, people may join you, they'll leave you in 3 months, right? I think that's very important to understand. And instead of portraying the organization as what it is not, I think Amazon's a great example. They have taken enough bashing around their work-life balance and everything. And Jeff Bezos has come out and said, "Hey, that's what we are. That's the DNA of the organization, right?" Uh, Again, not debating right or wrong there, but at least they have stayed authentic to that, and their processes, policies, all of that match that persona. Um, Now, what I've realized, a lot of startups, and I obviously speak with a lot of talent leaders in these startups, um, including founders of some Series A startups, they want to do a mix and match of a Google, a Facebook, a LinkedIn, a Microsoft. That will never happen, right? Because the context of the org is different. The competitive landscape that the org operates in is different. And the value prop that you then present to the talent market will be different, right? Now, for example, like I think there's a fundamental need to have congruence across all your talent priorities. Your comp cannot signal a cash heavy sort of a sentiment to the market. And then when your salespeople join in, they don't make enough cash because they don't meet their targets because the targets are stretched, right? Or from a tech standpoint, it cannot be like you are promoting a whole bunch of ownership, but then you're not giving out enough stocks, right? So the comp mix needs to also be able to signal to the talent market the sort of organization that you are. I'm very happy that I have two HRBPs on this panel who actually think of talent problems holistically and not just a COE's problem, because I'm sometimes I have been on the other side of the thing, right? Where all right, it's your problem, figure it out, it's your team's problem, let's get those numbers in. What happens to the leaking bucket? So I think every person retained is more important than one person hired, right? So I am a huge believer of that, and that does way more for your employer value proposition than um, any other fancy digital media stuff that we would do. We would still do it. I myself am as guilty as charged. I do it myself, uh, but I firmly believe that all of that will be bells and whistles unless everything else within the organization is completely sorted and we stay true to what we really stand for as an organization, right? Core principles, values that organizations have, they obviously they good look good on office walls, but then they need to translate into actual practices. A lot of times for tech talent, right? I think what a lot of founders or early startups feel that, hey, pay them, they'll stay. And a lot of times people do not necessarily speak up, and especially in this current situation, you won't be able to gauge, right? You don't meet people unless someone tells you something upfront. You won't know, and there are options galore in the market. Suddenly you have that resignation coming. So I think just extending to Ram's point, rather than having solutions or playbooks for problems, uh, let's try and figure a way in which we don't have problems or anticipate problems, right? Because now, by the time you figure out what solution to apply to a particular problem, the person has made up his mind. He's either going to a Microsoft or a Databricks or to a Google. And hey, the challenge is not just Indian companies or US MNCs in India, it is global. People are offering remote work. So the boundaries are blurred and the opportunities have just exploded big time. So I think unless organizations get their house in order, blaming talent, and this is like self-defense here, blaming talent acquisition for not being able to hire backfills will never help, because it has to be a combined, unified sort of front, if you will. If it's a war for talent, and it's a bloodbath out there right now, so all the Avengers will have to assemble in that sense.
Abhishek, this really leads to another question which is there. This just really emerged from what you have said. Uh, a lot of times when we are working with the pre-Series A organization or who has recently got a Series A funding, they cite a lot of examples. So when I say examples, they will say that I got this tech head of engineering for who was at 80 lakh for 25 lakh. I gave him some equity. Why can't you guys get someone like that? And there's a lot of notion which really goes about this thing that I have done it in past, but that would be for at least only one person or maybe two people, but they feel the entire tech team can be built on those lines, which is practically what we perceive is to be very impossible. But we really, from a founder's perspective also, what is the right mix which you feel, because you would have hired hundreds of tech talents, and what is the right mix which you would recommend to to the founders who are at Series A or a Series A or maybe Series B even? So if you can just share something on that.
Now, I think a lot of times with not just pre-series A, right? It happens with most founders. In fact, most organizations, leaders just feel that they take it on their ego if you're not able to get someone from a Google or Microsoft or LinkedIn or Apple or whatever, right? But it's important again for the organization to understand where they are at, and what value a particular individual from a certain setup is going to bring to their overall ecosystem, right? If the value makes sense, then yes, obviously it would require requisite compensation. If not, it's okay to move away, right? You not win every negotiation, you'll not win every talent war, and unless, especially for startups, right, where they need to make those trade-offs really quickly, they'll have to think of their talent budget in terms of your stock portfolio or whatever, right? So you buy some really expensive stock, you then buy stock which is going to perform over a long period of time. You're going to hold on to that stock, right? So you need to really figure how you're going to really allocate funds and resources, rather than it's not a direct answer, but there is no direct answer according to me. You will not be able to.
Yeah, so one of
And
the
Ram keeps distracting me with these amazing backgrounds, but no. So there's no one answer. I'm sorry, Kushal, Ram, if you have anything specific there, but I don't think there would be a
but I
specific
think
answer to
one
this.
thing which we can safely
Yeah, I would agree. I think
I
it's
agree, yeah.
again going back to the same point, right? It's going to be solution backwards. We have to be problem backwards here. That's it. Just figure out what the problem is and just go back and actually identify the right solution.
So I think what we can easily say, this thing what Abhishek has just said, that I think choosing the right battles is something which is going to be so very critical while we are trying to hire the tech talent. I think that is something which people really go all out, and maybe that is not the right or the best approach in the given scenarios. Now this takes me to another question, which is for you, Kushal, uh, and this is our kind of perception and heads up which we have seen, is that the rate of attrition when we talk about for the entire tech and the product team and the engineering teams has significantly increased in the last 5 quarters compared to the last quarters before March 2020. That is what our understanding has been till now from whatever basic research which we did. And one of the biggest reasons which we feel is the lack of grapevine network inside the organization. Because so while we are working in two segments. Let's see in that way, that we have got the inside folks, and then we have got the friends who are from the, again, similar engineering background. And then someone will say, "Arey, you are still sitting at 15 lakh. I got a 25 lakh offer." So, and that kind of influences the person more than an HR BP who is inside sitting and who's actually genuinely thinking good about that candidate. Okay, boss, there's a lot of things which we have to do in future, but that person has already got influenced by some of his or her friend, right? So really want to understand, Kushal, in terms of the attrition, that is there a melting pot? Are we seeing anything reaching any peak, or is just a build up? So it's a wave which is still building right now. And we have obviously talked a lot about how we can, the challenges which are there, but and a lot of people are spending a lot of money on predicting people who will leave the organization, specifically the key resources or the key talent is something which is again a new word. But when it comes to engineering team, it's the entire bit is very important and fundamental if you're building a product based startup or an organization. So I really want to understand that what is your take on this entire attrition movement, which is kind of skyrocketing right now?
So, Sumit, to answer your question, I think this is one wave, I think, where we have not hit the peak till now. And it will only grow because there are companies which are mushrooming every day in and day out. And honestly, in the last century, if you look at it, there are these four industrial revolutions that have happened. The first one was all about using steam and water for mass production. Then we came to using electrical energy for mass production. Then came the IT revolution of your Infosys and Cognizant, where you looked at IT for automation. Now we are in a digital revolution, like digital industrial revolution, where every industry needs engineers. every industry, right, from farming to engineering to e-commerce to everything, to space, to every single industry needs engineers because they are now trying to become more digital. Digital is the new buzzword, right? Data is the new oil.
Correct.
And our data scientists and engineers are the new drillers, right? They are getting insane salaries. So this is where it is. This will only grow because every industry is trying to pivot into a digital revolution right now. What is also happening is that if you have a great idea and you are someone who wants to start something, you will not look for VC funding first. You will look for a CTO first.
Tech co-founder, correct.
Yes, that's the thing that you will look at first. You will not worry about the money, the seed funding round, the Series A or whatever. You will worry to have a good tech co-founder. We are right now in a place where every startup that is now getting started, the background of the people who are co-founders would be definitely engineers, or one of them would be engineers. So that's a problem statement that we are looking at right now. And people are getting lured not by money, honestly. Sumit. Money is still something that we can fight. People are getting lured by the idea that you're trying to push. What is the challenging problem statement that you're trying to solve? These are young people, right? Or most of them are in their late 20s, early 30s. They want to solve something. They want to create an impact on the industry. One thing that we hear in a lot of our interviews, I'm sure Ram and Abhishek would have heard this also, the scale. What is the scale what I'm working at? And my problem, what are the problem statement that I'm trying to solve? What is the scale of the problem statement? That is what they're more interested about. So even if you're giving them money, I've had people where I in fact have matched the offer and tried to retain people, but they would not stay back because they were not willing to work for money. They were willing to work for the problem statement. What is the impact that I'm creating? What is the new geeky problem statement that I'm trying to create? That's why you see all these fintechs, your insurtechs, all these companies luring people from Amazon, from Facebook, and these challenging, and because they're throwing challenging problem statements. Now imagine creating an insurance product which is paperless, uh, vis-a-vis working in a company where you're just changing the color of a UI from pink to a different pink. You would rather be in that problem statement where you're trying to make a big impact. You're changing the landscape of the industry, right? So that's one of the reasons that people are leaving, because new companies are coming up, new ideas are coming up, and these are some challenging ideas that people see that they can create a great impact. The other thing that I think, which I also call it the Elon syndrome, where now people follow leaders. Right? If you look at LinkedIn, every leader who wants to hire or every startup co-founder who wants to hire, they will talk a lot on LinkedIn, on Glassdoor. People are writing, people are answering Quora questions, which are co-founders and CEOs and CTOs. And that's where they're trying to lure people, right? Imagine you getting a reply from Kunal Shah on your LinkedIn comment. You will definitely at least interview, right? So that's the other thing that is happening, right? Your leadership, how engaged your leadership is. All our policies, all our processes are already on Glassdoor, right? So what Abhishek was saying earlier about the processes and policies that we are creating internally, they are almost everybody knows about them through Glassdoor. They also look at our reviews. They also look at how impactful our interviews are, whether we are a company which has neutral interview process or a positive interview process. Everything is there for people to read.
Right.
So that's another challenge that we are. Tech as an industry is a very open industry. There are a lot of resources that people have. And to add to your thing, it's genuinely an issue where people are roommates and they compare their salaries. My roommate was getting 15 lakh and now moving to a 30 lakh. I want to have the similar thing, and that's an actual problem. And to add to this entire scenario, this COVID thing has accelerated journey for every organization, right? Every organization now sees that their growth has become 2x and 3x. Every tech organization primarily, and that's why they're willing to dole out offers which are unheard of, right? And you are not only competing with Indian tech companies, you're competing with companies from London, from US, because with remote work, anybody can work from anywhere, right? So we see a lot of offers coming from Facebook, from Google, not even Facebook India, Facebook London, Google US is giving offers for people to our techies in India, and they don't expect them to join in US. They can work from India only. So that's another issue that is coming up in terms of attrition. So all these factors clubbing together, I only see this going up, and all of us have to gear up for this challenge. That's all I can say. This is still the first wave is not picked up.
Sure. It sure. So, about from the attrition part now, obviously, when we talk about the entire demand and supply, we try to put in some economics to this entire thing. Obviously, the demand is at it's one of its heights, right? And supply is something which is still not been able to match that. And what we also understand is that that things are going to become even more challenging in the next 3, 4, 5 quarters, till the time obviously we kind of really settle down and start coming back to office, or maybe have more physical interactions. that really takes me to a question, Ram, where so you worked in two great product companies, two organizations who really change the face of this entire Indian ecosystem. And obviously, every year the new set of HRBPs who are joining the organization. We want to understand from your experience as to when you started as an HRBP and now you are kind of managing the HRBPs. Uh, what has changed? What has changed for you, right? So I don't want to understand the relativeness, but you as a personality, how has that changed? Because this is more from the lines of the people who would be becoming an HRBP tomorrow, to really be on that spectrum and also on that edge, so that they know the kind of challenges which lie in front of them.
Yeah, sure, cool. I think I spoke about those 3 points, and they're actually summary of what my learnings were, right? So that's how I started off. When I started off as a HR business partner, uh, I think I think the first thing is, you're trying to prove yourself, and when you're trying to prove yourself, what you're trying to do is uh, you're trying to showcase that you're actually functionally strong. You're trying to showcase that, hey, I can actually go back and actually solve problems. A lot many times, you start off with a you first mindset. That's generally what you do, because you're trying to prove yourself. That's what it is, right? You're trying to establish your credibility. You're trying to establish build partnerships. That's where it actually happens. And when I look back at where I am today, probably it starts with what I did in those when I started off was when you would actually focus a lot more on the purity of the solutions that you actually bring in. A lot many times you're actually looking at, okay, do I have the best of the designs? Do I actually have it? Probably like hey, have I actually benchmark with n number of companies, and probably is it like the best solution on paper, etc., etc. And what actually happens is all of these things don't matter. That's what you actually realize. What you realize is that hey, as long as you're able to probably align and arrive at a sweet spot between what drives your business and how you can actually go back and actually enable your business, that's the fundamental reality. Like you realize that the you first mindset, or hey, here is what I know, here is what I've actually heard people do, and I'll actually bring all of that actually changes. You realize that you start off with, okay, here is when we speak about business understanding, when we speak about business partnerships, you do realize that what business partnership really means. And that's what changed for me. And when I look back right now, what we fundamentally do is we fundamentally stick to first principles. Right now we fundamentally look towards like it's if you actually look at how product folks actually think about consumers, we think about consumer lifecycle management. You think about, hey, here are the multiple touch points. Here is how you actually identify a new user, you actually acquire a new user, onboard a new user. So you go back to fundamentals, and you actually realize that the CLM life cycles, or the fundamentals of how do you come to a particular problem, innovation nowadays, which is try to have a playbook which is probably rooted in a lot of your consumer understanding. And I strongly believe in the fact that unless and until you can actually claim that, hey, I understand quite a bit of my consumer, which is my employees, you're just lost. And that's what I do nowadays. When I work with the team, one is you have the luxury of actually being able to hire people who are as passionate about as this particular problem statement as you are. Sometimes you actually hire people who are actually better than you, and then what you do is you just fundamentally channel them towards a common vision. And the common vision is hey, how do you actually create people strategy as an enabler to drive tech strategy, product strategy, business strategy. And when you try to do that, don't do something fancy. Just stick to the fundamental first principles, and go back and actually say that uh, are you doing something that actually resonates with your consumers? Are you doing something where your consumers are actually coming back and saying that, hey, this really adds value to me? And as long as that really happens, and you're able to do it in the contours of what your business can actually provide you, because sometimes like for example, there are business has its own ups and downs. In certain times you'll be able to afford a very fancy program. Sometimes the reality is that you would want to go slow. That is the reality of business life cycles. And at the end of the day, you have to actually balance this entire act of how do I actually go back and solve for my end consumer, which is employees, while at the same time balancing it out within the business realities. So that's pretty much what I do. I think probably it's trying to, if I were to actually look at it, it's trying to fundamentally simplify the problem
problem statement as much as possible. Focus a lot more on few things that you can do and do well, rather than actually spraying and praying that things actually land. Do realize that while as much as we speak about people, etc., uh, an employee lifecycle management is very similar to consumer lifecycle management, which means metrics help a lot in actually understanding how your employees actually feel, and actually having a pulse of these right metrics, as being able to understand what metrics is actually giving you the right gauge of the employees. That's really helpful. Then I think a little bit of scale thinking. You do realize that there's a difference between you being actually you directly interacting with employees and actually getting a pulse, versus suddenly you actually have a bigger team, and then you feel like okay, do I know that what my probably like the employee who joined yesterday is actually thinking and feeling. So which means you have to put in place scale processes, leverage technology as much as possible. I think fundamentally what fun changed for me is that you started thinking community first, and which is fundamentally you start about engineers, and then you start about engineering community, and then you start about tech as a community, and you start realizing that hey, how do you actually solve community problems, and then take inspiration. Like when I work with product managers, the only thing which I do is that hey, how best can I actually borrow as many great things that they do, and can I bring it back to the way in which we do employee life cycle management, right? That's principally what actually happens. They have solved scale pretty honestly. They actually solve for 10 million 20 million consumers, and all that we're trying to do is we actually take that, and we're actually trying to solve for 10,000 employees at the end of the day, or 20,000 employees at the end of the day, right? So it's just looking for opportunities where you can actually get inspired, and trying to actually pick, borrow, and steal as many best practices that they can actually
I, really sorry, there was an internet lag. Sorry.
No problem. Yeah.
Problem.
Okay. So and this will lead to me this entire thing which you said kind of leads to. Am I audible now? Is it better?
There's a lag, so at least for me. I'm not sure what others.
Yeah, it's the same for me too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so give me 20 seconds. Let me just reconnect with you. Yeah, is it better now?
Much better. Yeah.
Yes.
Very
Much
good.
better.
Awesome. Okay, so this really leads to the next question, which is to Abhishek. And Abhishek, this is a very abstract question, honestly, uh, which a lot of CTOs really have in terms of when they are hiring, or what we have kind of seen from while we are helping organization find tech talent. One of the challenges which is there is that so they would have given detailed job descriptions. We find the people, they've done the interviews, five rounds of interviews are done, and then suddenly there is this dilemma which comes that this guy is not from an IIT, this guy is from LPU, or this guy is from not from a tier 1 college, from tier 4 college, but he is good enough to be at that level. And you suddenly see that okay, we are not going to take this talent any further, right? So the question really is that how do we define the right talent is something which I really want to understand from you, because again the experience which is there, and how important is it to prioritize the exposure, the experience, or the post graduation degree which you have. You might be a lot of competency can be there, but a lot of times which we have observed is that if you are just not from an NIT or an IIT, you might just get rejected on the face of it without any logical feedback, which obviously becomes difficult for a candidate and for us, that what has really happened. So what is the right talent, and how should the recruiters or the people who are finding the talent should prepare their mindset? If you can share some insights on that, Abhishek.
Sure. So I actually have been on a journey on this one, right? From And now I probably would label it as a lazy recruiter's guide to recruiting, filling in keywords around IITs or NITs. But luckily, in the org that I'm in right now, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if someone's an engineer or not, as long as they can do the job. Maybe you'd want someone with that pedigree, because that's how the PE ecosystem works, right? They would want to see people with a certain pedigree, a certain set of experiences. But otherwise, if you're hiring developers, tech leads, eng managers, it doesn't matter as long as they can get the job done. Interestingly, and I probably, this is my shameless plugin of BrowserStack. Interestingly, we are building a tech company in Bombay, right? So a lot of our hires have been local Bombay University folks, who don't necessarily, and this doesn't mean Ram and Kushal, you go back and tell your recruitment teams, but who don't necessarily get poached because they don't come from IITs and NITs, right? They're doing great work. They stay with us fairly long, and that works in our favor, right? Similarly, there are a lot of organizations that have adopted that pivot, and it is not very difficult. It is difficult to do, say, in a sales or an HR or other places where you'll have to really get down to a BEI interview to figure out the brass tacks. But in tech, it's relatively easy. You have your problem statements, you have your standardized problem statements, you have your benchmarks, your 5 feet sort of fence. Someone jumps 6 feet, 8 feet, 5 feet, but they get over the fence, they qualify, and then you choose the best of the lot, right? So it is fairly black and white in tech, any which way. So long answer to your question. For me, it doesn't matter whether someone's from an IIT, NIT, or even an engineer. As long as they can code, they're passionate for the sort of work that we do, and they self-select themselves into the ecosystem.
Okay, great, great. Just couple of things before we end. You can share your insights on. It's not thrown to any one person. You can share whatever you feel like. Uh, so when we are talking about, we have to see how the HRBP is, especially in the tech talent, when we're managing the tech talent. What should be the key performing indicators? Again, it's a very cliched thing. I'm sorry for that. But what should be the key performing indicators which really the founders must see while they are kind of managing the people? So don't see this from an HRBP lens. Now, a lot of time founders have to do the HRBP role. And it's such a role because not everyone can afford it, but everyone has to do that in order to manage the people. So just want to understand, like, what should be the parameters which we should really take into consideration while we are kind of evaluating our own work contribution which we have done in terms of managing the tech talent.
I'll probably start off with something abstract, and then
Sure.
Ram and Kushal can add on. So at least in a startup, it is about, irrespective of HRBP or a COE member, it is how effective we've made the founders, right? How much better we've made the organization, because the line of sight is fairly clear, right? So if the HR head or the HRBP has been able to even hold up the mirror to the founders and help them change a particular habit, which has then positively had downstream effects, that's a win, right? But that's as abstract as that. But then for me, that's a
Sure.
big win.
Absolutely. Great. Ram, Kushal.
I think I was actually, in fact, when you asked this question, while of course I understood that the natural answers would be like, hey, look at attrition numbers, etc. I think fundamentally what Abhishek said was pretty much what I found as the best utility. Like, if you ask me, when you look back at those 3 years, of course there are other employee life cycle matrices that you actually track, follow: attrition, offer reject ratios, internal NPS, external NPS. Fundamentally, the value that you add as a HR business partnering team is measured by a few things, right? So one is, and maybe, we don't follow them, but have you been able to be a conscience keeper for your business? Have you actually added value to your founders? Have you been able to give them the difficult message, even if it actually means, you have to actually stand up and actually showcase spine? So such occasions actually matter a lot more. Of course, there are a ton of employee lifecycle matrices that are already available. Basic research around an employee lifecycle or employee experience numbers would actually show you that. But fundamentally, I think the places where I felt I have actually added a lot more value are those areas where like you've been able to give people that space to be vulnerable with you, and actually in that space you've actually even the founders, even the CTOs, the CXOs, all need that space where they can actually come back and share their doubts, be have a space where they can just come back and actually just say, hey, here is what I'm not really sure about. How do I actually go about that? And as long as you actually create that space for these sort of folks and actually help them navigate a particular situation, I think that's the best possible outcome. Sometimes I see us as advisors, counselors, conscience keepers, sometimes you are executors. But the biggest leverage has been that where you have been able to help steer certain decisions and help probably give a particular message and probably like tell someone that hey, this is not the right way. Probably I don't see it this way. And those are elements where I have actually taken a lot of pride about.
Sure. Yeah. Sure. Great.
Honestly, Abhishek and Ram have literally nailed it. The only thing that I can add is that I remember in an interview I asked one of the CEOs in terms of what is the JD. He said, "There's no JD. I just want you to replace me from a people standpoint." So as long as you are able to, like to add to what Abhishek was saying, you're able to cascade the vision of the founder, and you're able to replace that void that comes in once the organization grows beyond 100, 150 odd people. I think you're doing your job as an HR business partner, because that's why they hire you at that level.
Sure. All right. Okay. Great. Guys, thank you so much for your time. And there are a lot of insights which have come. We would be using the entire content generated in different forms. And really, thank you for your time. And anything you guys want to add for the end?
No, it was a great way to spend Saturday evening. Good to meet you, Kushal and Ram again, and Sumit.
Absolutely, Abhishek. It was fun, and thank you, Sumit. Thank you for this.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sumit. Thank you for organizing this, and looking forward to more such content coming from
Absolutely.
Azure.
Absolutely.
Thank you, dude.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right,
Bye.
thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.